I got bullied, I dealt with it by making movies.
Yeah.
I mean, making movies was my cover-up. That when you start something, you should finish it.
You can't create a story that you haven't yourself lived in some way. Otherwise, you are just a craftsman.
You know, I have 7 kids. When they were all growing up, I told them stories every night. I went from room to room to room, telling them all different stories. And I do the same thing with a camera and a crew.
Art support.
And I think it's okay that a first-time filmmaker, being so inspired by movies and music videos and any kind of music or media, can make a derivative film. It's okay that your first videos and your first attempts at telling a story are derivative, are obviously influenced by something that that you saw last week, and you want to kind of do a version. There's nothing wrong with learning the ABCs, learning your craft by being derivative, but at some point you're going to need to find your natural voice and find a way to give voice to who you are. And who you are, by the way, who you are is original. It just is, because you're not Tom, you're not me, and you're not your best friend, and you're not your teacher, you're not your parents. You are you.
The first time I picked up a movie camera was because I was wrecking my electric trains when I was about 12 years old. I was crashing the 2 trains into each other and making a complete mess, and sometimes the trains would break and my dad would have to take them back to the electric train store to get them fixed, and he told me if I ever broke my trains again, he would take the entire set away. And we had an 8mm Kodak movie camera. And I remember coming home from school one day and setting up a couple of shots, and I photographed the trains crashing. And luckily the trains didn't break, but I had it on film. I got one train going left to right, then inside the camera I stopped, I put the camera on the other train, keeping the screen direction right, the other train going right to left. And I set the camera down, shooting straight out at the track, and both trains came together and crashed. And then what I wound up doing was looking at that piece of film, 90 seconds of film, over and over and over again, and it satisfied my need for some reason to break things in those days. And in that sense, I discovered the power of cinema.
My first movies were just basically imitations of movies I was going out to theaters to see. So they were pure, genre movies, war movies, westerns, science fiction. Well, and there were no statements. I made no statements. I'm talking about my 8mm movies. I'm going way back before I became a director.
Yeah.
And I'm just saying that in light of feeling a little bit like an outsider, movies made me feel inside my own skill set. The first time I sensed that an audience was kind of agreeing with my choice of profession was when I was a Boy Scout, and I went out for the photography merit badge, and I wanted to, and the requirement in the merit badge simply said you have to tell a picture with still photographs. And I made this little Western with my sisters and my friends and my next door neighbors and some of the Boy Scouts, and everybody had cowboy suits because we lived in Arizona, my goodness, And so we all brought our cowboy suits out, and I made this little Western movie and showed it to the Boy Scout troop on a Friday night when we had a meeting, and they went ballistic. They were screaming and clapping and laughing, both with and at the movie. I didn't care. It was a response. And the response set me on fire. It absolutely set me on fire, and I never wanted to live without some kind of affirmation, some kind of collective feedback.
What calls to me is not whether a film is going to make a gazillion dollars. Mm-hmm. What calls to me is there a deep urge in the center of myself that only that film will release and then exorcise. And that's the only condition I'll direct a movie.
What I love to do more than anything else, I love to make pictures so I can look at them, so you could look at them, and so I can watch you looking at them, which is really, for me, the best part. If I had to single out one area to which I have an utter devotion, it would be with my preoccupation with the idea and the fight to still believe in the idea when so many others around you just don't get it, and the challenge of staying interested in one single idea for sometimes years, and the struggle not to contaminate that idea after months and years of obsessing over it. When I was in my early teens, I stayed up all night writing a screenplay and felt something to this day I swear I cannot get enough of. It was as close to the feeling of flying as I have ever had. You know what I mean when you're trying to get the words on paper and you're 3 thoughts ahead of yourself and it's a race to get it all down before it goes back to wherever that stuff originally comes from. And it was called Inspiration. And I actually made a movie from that script I wrote all night, and it was called Firelight. And it was truly an awful movie. But the process was what it was all about. The experience of that obsessive focus, of having an idea and actually being able to photograph it. That's been the magic potion for me ever since.
But when you have a dream, it doesn't often come at you screaming in your face, this is who you are, this is what you must be for the rest of your life. Sometimes a dream almost whispers. And I've always said to my kids, the hardest thing to listen to, your instincts, your human personal intuition, always whispers, it never shouts. Very hard to hear. So you have to, every day of your lives, be ready to hear what whispers in your ear. It very rarely shouts. And if you can listen to the whisper, and if it tickles your heart, and it's something you think you want to do for the rest of your life, then that is going to be what you do for the rest of your life, and we will benefit from everything you do. And dyslexia, of course, was the first thing that led me to realize that I was different. Although I didn't have a name for it, I just knew that I dreaded going to school. I was 2 years behind the rest of my class, and of course I went through what everybody goes through, is teasing.
Yeah.
And I had to go through that for a long time. And so the teasing, you know, led to a lot of other problems I was having in school, but it all stemmed from the fact that I was embarrassed to stand up in front of the class and read. Nobody diagnosed me as being dyslexic, and so all they could do was assume that I wasn't studying hard enough, that I wasn't reading hard enough, that I was perhaps lazy, yes.
Yes, there's always envy. Envy is a good thing. You can't rise to any great height without not just envy, but it's because envy might be the wrong word. It's more jealousy and ambition and wanting to do better than those guys. And they all felt that way. We all felt that way about each other. But in trying to inspire each other and outdo each other, we worked together and collaborated with each other to make our films better. My movies are better for having Francis, George, and Marty, and Brian in my life. And I think some of their films are too.
Every movie I've ever made has come from some place, whether conscious or unconsciously, emotional and deep. Even the kind of confections, you know, come from pain. Even Hook, which is a confection that my kids always loved, the movie Hook, you know, came from a deep place. History is the greatest writer of drama and of irony and of catastrophe and of destiny and of victory. You can't do better than history.
About 3/4 of my films all come from books. And because of that, you've already got a leg up. You know, half the work's already been done.
I know that my movies, you know, are kind of rubber bands, you know, and sometimes even stretching to the breaking point between genres, between a science fantasy or science fiction genre, or between an adventure horror film, and then all the historical films I make. So I do vacillate back and forth between things that don't need research to authenticate the truth, because the imagination is the imagination. When I was younger, I didn't like shooting, I liked editing, and now when I'm older, I love shooting. And I also love editing, but I love shooting. As I've gotten older, I've just gotten a little more comfortable with the fact that when you make a movie, it's a real social experience. Every single film I've made has been a marker of who I was at that time of the making of that picture.